Okay, let's take a look at blood pressure, okay? Let's take a look at blood pressure. What is it that regulates blood pressure? So right down here at the bottom, we see homeostasis. Whoop, let's go back here. We're looking at homeostasis, which means a dynamic state of change. The seesaw can go up and down. Well, let's say that there's something creating a rise in blood pressure. So if we have increased blood pressure, there's going to be receptors in the carotid arteries. This is up in the side of the neck. There are receptors there called baroreceptors. Baro, think of the weathermen. The weathermen go, well, the barometric pressure, right? So baroreceptors, these are pressure receptors, and they're going to pick up what's the pressure of the blood that's pounding up against the walls of these arterioles. It's not only in the carotids, but we're going to have these baroreceptors in the aortic arch. Remember, here's the heart, and there's the arch of the aorta with the three valves off the trumpet. So we want to make sure that we have sensors that can pick up the amount of pressure in the heart as well as the pressure of blood going into the brain, because when there's dysfunction, gosh, you can get a stroke from too much pressure in the blood vessels of the brain or a heart attack. So impulses travel along these afferent nerves. Remember, afferent means sensory nerves from the baroreceptors, and they're going to go to the cardioinhibitory center. The cardioinhibitory center. And it's going to inhibit the acceleration, meaning it's going to stop everything. It's going to inhibit the sympathetics, right? The sympathetics speed everything up. So if you decrease the sympathetics, your heart rate decreases and the contractility decreases, which means the cardiac output decreases. When you decrease sympathetic tone, and the parasympathetics are stimulated, but when you decrease sympathetic tone, the blood vessels aren't constricted anymore, they actually dilate. So when this lumen opens up, the pressure goes down. So you get decreased resistance in this blood vessel and you get decreased cardiac output, you're going to get balanced blood pressure. Now, let's say the opposite happens. Something happens decreasing the blood pressure. Well, same thing. The baroreceptors in the carotid sinuses and the aortic arch pick up that the blood pressure is too low. It goes to the neural system to stimulate the sympathetics. When you stimulate the sympathetics, remember the fight or flight response, your heart rate increases and your heart starts to pound. So your cardiac output increases. And at the same point in time, look at the diameter of the lumen of the blood vessel, it constricts. That's called vasoconstriction, whereas here it's vasodilation. So this is vasoconstriction that increases the blood pressure. When it increases the blood pressure because you have increased resistance. You got increased resistance. So the only way you can decrease resistance here is if you dilate it or you give the person a blood thinner. So if they take aspirin or Coumadin or warfarin, any type of blood thinner, it also is designed to decrease the resistance. Okay? Because if you have increased resistance, you're going to have increased cardiac output, increased resistance, you get increased blood pressure. Okay? Now, what are some of the things that can increase blood pressure hormonally? Well, norepinephrine and epinephrine can increase blood pressure. ADH, antidiuretic hormone, can increase blood pressure. Angiotensin 2 can increase blood pressure. Well, how does it do that? Let's take a look here. We have decreased blood pressure. And remember, the end result is we need to try and increase blood pressure. So the baroreceptors are sensing that we have low blood pressure, we have sympathetic stimulation. So the sympathetic stimulation goes to the kidneys, and your kidneys release renin. Now, what is renin going to do? Renin goes to something called, let's see if I could draw this for you. Let me go up here for a second. We have the liver that makes angiotensinogen. Now remember, anything that ends in ogen is inactive. So the liver makes angiotensinogen. Angio means blood vessel. Tensin looks like tension. So we're dealing with something that deals with the tension of blood vessels, except ogen means it's inactive. So then our good friend, our kidneys come into play that make renin. So angiotensin, renin bumps into angiotensin. What are the first three letters of renin? Rene, like renal, kidneys. What the renin does to the angiotensin is it knocks off the ogen. So that angiotensinogen becomes angiotensin 1. And if there's an angiotensin 1, there has to be an angiotensin 2. And what converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2 is something that the lungs make that's called angiotensin converting enzyme, ACE. So angiotensin converting enzyme converts angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. And what's angiotensin 2 going to do? It's going to increase your blood pressure. So what we're looking at here is that the kidneys make renin, which eventually makes angiotensin 2. What I did here is just explain all the steps, how renin ends up giving us angiotensin 2, but really renin converts angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1 first. The lungs that make angiotensin converting enzyme convert angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2 to increase the blood pressure. So renin, eventually we get to this angiotensin 2, and that's responsible for increasing blood pressure by stimulating aldosterone. Aldosterone increases sodium reabsorption. Think of salt. When you increase salt, you increase blood pressure. When you increase salt, if you eat salty chips, you drink water. When you have salt and water, your blood volume goes up, and that's going to increase blood pressure. Angiotensin 2 constricts your blood vessels. When you constrict, blood pressure goes up. Antidiuretic hormone, which is stimulated by angiotensin 2, ADH, antidiuretic hormone, anti-diuretic, it means you can't pee, so you're increasing water absorption. All of these things increase blood pressure. So angiotensin 2, we'll call it here, angiotensin 2, increases your blood pressure by a few ways. Number one, it increases your salt cravings. So your salt cravings go up. And what happens when you eat something salty? Then it makes you thirsty. So you eat salt and then you drink water, you get thirsty. Now the salt that you ate is held on to by aldosterone because aldosterone increases sodium reabsorption. And then the water you drank is held on to by antidiuretic hormone, so the blood volume increases. Pretty cool how that happens. Okay, what decreases blood pressure? The heart makes its own hormone. If the blood pressure is too high, it makes atrial natriuretic peptide. And in the word natriuretic is Na, right? NaCl, that's salt. Na is natrium. You get that from this, atrial natriuretic peptide. So if you have a decrease, If you have an increase in blood pressure, your heart can release ANP to decrease it. It says, hey, let's get rid of some salt so that the blood volume goes down and the blood pressure goes down. Hey, let's push out nitric oxide, and NO is a vasodilator. Okay? This is what Viagra is. Viagra is a vasodilator. Alcohol causes the blood pressure to drop because it inhibits antidiuretic hormone. Now, blood pressure, I do have a link here on how to do blood pressure. Well, blood pressure should be less than 120/80 millimeters of mercury. So what is the 120? Well, that's the pressure of blood in the vessels when the heart is beating. Well, that's during contraction. That's during depolarization. That's systolic pressure. The 80 is the pressure between the beats when the heart's relaxed, which is diastolic pressure, which is repolarization. Okay, so less than 120/80 is normal blood pressure. If it's between the 120 to 139, over 80 to 89, that's pre-hypertension, and high blood pressure is when it's over 140, over 90. When we take pulses, there's so many different places we can take pulses. We're pretty familiar with the common carotid artery. When you see runners or joggers, they take their fingers and they place it to the sternocleidomastoid muscle. They're feeling the common carotid. Some people put their hand over the radial pulse to feel the radial artery. When we take blood pressure, the stethoscope goes over the brachial artery. But there are some other biggies like the temporal artery. This is really a medical emergency, especially in smokers when they have pain and tenderness and headaches around that temporal region. There's a condition called temporal arteritis, commonly found in smokers, that can lead to blindness. For the lower part of the body, the femoral artery is important to feel, but so is this one, the dorsal pedal. If the dorsal pedal is weak, especially in men, that means there's poor ability to eject blood to the lower parts of the body that usually causes ED, which is erectile dysfunction. Typically, you'll see in men hair on the legs, and then right here it stops. And most people think, well, maybe it's from wearing socks and it wears down. No, no, no. It's from poor blood supply to the lower parts of the body. So during a physical examination, it's really important to look at the hair distribution on the legs.